Hello everyone, I'm your storyteller, and I'm here to help you relax. I know many of you listen to this to fall asleep. Before you do, please give the video a like and subscribe to the channel. Also, let me know where you're from and what time it is for you right now. Now, get comfy and close your eyes. The old clock sat on my grandmother's mantelpiece. It was a big, heavy thing made of dark wood, with a gold face and a pendulum that swung slowly, making a low tick-tock sound. I had come back to my grandmother's old house to clean it up. She had passed away, and it was my job to get the house ready to sell. I wasn't happy about being there. The house was far from the city, and the clock had always given me a bad feeling. The clock had a strange mark on the back. It looked like a sun, but with a crack down the middle. My grandmother had told me stories about it, saying it was a family heirloom passed down through the generations. She would always say, the sun must never be broken. As a kid, I thought it was just a strange game. Now, alone in the house, it felt like a warning. I decided to sell the house to a big company that wanted to tear it down and build a shopping center. The money would be great. It would change my life. But every time I thought about it, I felt a strange coldness in the room. That night, I put the old clock in a box. I didn't want to think about it anymore. As soon as I closed the lid, the house went quiet. No more low tick-tock. But then, I heard a different sound. A soft scrape coming from the box. I ignored it. I went to bed, but I couldn't sleep. I kept dreaming of the old clock. But in my dream, the clock was a person. A very old woman who was crying. She pointed at my arm, and when I looked down, there was a mark on my skin. It looked like a little sun with a crack. It was the same mark as on the back of the clock. I woke up, my heart beating fast. My arm ached. I pulled up my sleeve and saw a faint red mark on my skin. It was just like the one in my dream. I thought it was just a weird bruise. But as the day went on, the mark got darker and colder. I called my sister, who lived in a different state. "How's the house?" she asked. "It's quiet," I said, looking at the mark on my arm. "I'm going to sell it." I didn't tell her about the mark or the weird feeling in the house. I couldn't explain it. That night, the clock was still in the box, but the house wasn't quiet anymore. I heard whispers, like old memories talking to each other. The whispers told me about the clock and the mark. They told me that the clock held a secret, a promise from long ago. It was a promise to protect the house and the land. By getting rid of the clock, I was breaking that promise. I didn't believe it. It was just an old clock. But the mark on my arm was getting bigger. It spread from my wrist up to my elbow. It felt like my skin was turning to ice. I went back to the old books in the house. I found a diary from my great-great-grandmother. She wrote about the clock, calling it the heart of the house. She wrote that the clock held the spirit of the family. If the clock was taken away or broken, the spirit would be set free, but it would have nowhere to go. It would become lost and angry, and it would try to find a new home in the living. I looked at the contract from the development company, the one that would give me so much money. They wanted to tear the house down in a week. The mark on my arm now covered my whole arm. It was black and cold. I knew I couldn't sell the house. I couldn't let them break the clock. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about a promise, and a spirit, and a mark on my skin that was getting closer to my heart, with every tick of a clock that wasn't there. I picked up the phone to call the company. I would tell them the sale was off, but the phone was silent. I had no signal. I was alone with the cold, dark mark on my arm, the strange silence of the house, and the whispers that now felt like they were coming from inside me. I was becoming the new home. Story 2. The Night Doctor. Hello everyone. I'm your storyteller, here to help you unwind. Before you drift off, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Now, let's begin. I was an orderly at a mental health clinic called the Quiet House. My job was to take care of the patients on the night shift. The hospital was a very old building, with long dark hallways and low lights. At 3:33 a.m., every night, something strange happened. The lights in the hall would flicker in a weird pattern, and the air would get cold. That's when I first noticed. Room 212. The patient in that room was a man named Mr. Abernathy. He didn't talk much. He just sat and stared at a small toy train he kept in his room. The doctor said he had a kind of deep sadness that made him forget the real world. But I saw something else. At 3:33 a.m., his eyes would change. They would turn completely black, like deep holes, but with a tiny orange light inside them. It was a scary sight, like looking into a deep well, with a tiny fire at the bottom. When this happened, the temperature in the hallway would drop, and I'd hear a soft sound over the intercom. It wasn't static. It sounded like a series of long and short beeps, like Morse code. I knew Morse code from when I was a kid. The message was always the same. Help me. I told the head doctor, Dr. Cole, about it. He just smiled and said, "It's just the old building. The wires are a mess." He didn't believe me, but I knew what I saw. I knew what I heard. The next night, I was ready. I brought a small tape recorder and my phone. I wanted to prove I wasn't crazy. At 3:33 a.m., the air got cold. The lights flickered, and Mr. Abernathy's eyes went black again. This time, he looked right at me. The orange light in his eyes got brighter. I felt a cold pressure in my head, like someone was trying to push their way into my thoughts. My recorder and phone both died. Then, over the intercom, a new message came. Not beeps, but a voice. It was Mr. Abernathy's voice, but it was slow and deep, like a record playing on the wrong speed. It said, "I am here now." I was so scared. I ran. I broke eye contact, and the feeling in my head went away. The next morning, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had latched onto me. Something had seen me. I started to feel strange. My pupils would sometimes get bigger and bigger, until they were completely black. I would see things I shouldn't see. I would know things I shouldn't know. I looked at Mr. Abernathy's file and saw that he had been in a bad accident years ago. He was a radio operator. He had been hurt in a fire. I also found out that he was the only one who survived. I realized that what was in him was the thing that survived. It wasn't Mr. Abernathy. It was something else. Something from the fire. Something that came through the radio waves. It was trapped and needed a way out. I couldn't leave him. I couldn't leave the quiet house. I felt like I was the only one who could help. The thing in him was not evil, just lost. It was lonely. It had been stuck for so long. I decided to try and talk to it, not through Mr. Abernathy, but through the radio. I built a special radio in my room at the hospital. I got it ready for 3:33 a.m. when the time came. The air got cold, the lights flickered, and Mr. Abernathy's eyes went black. I tuned my radio. The static was so loud it hurt my ears. But I kept trying. I sent out a signal. "I hear you. I'm here. To help." The static stopped. On the radio, I heard the Morse code again, but this time it wasn't "help me." It was a series of numbers. I wrote them down. They weren't a location on a map. They were a frequency, a special radio frequency that could open a door. It was the frequency to send the lost thing back home. I knew that helping it would be dangerous. I was taking its attention away from Mr. Abernathy and putting it on me. I was becoming the new path, the new way for it to get out. The price was that I could feel the coldness of it in my own body. The amber light was now in my own eyes. But Mr. Abernathy was getting better. He was starting to talk. He was starting to remember. He was finally being freed. The day came for the final transmission. At 3:33 a.m., I sent the signal. I felt the thing rush out of me and through the radio waves. It was like a giant wave of cold air. Then, it was gone. Mr. Abernathy was cured. The doctors called it a miracle. I should have been happy, but I wasn't. Now, every night, at 3:33 a.m., I wake up. I can still feel the coldness. I can still see the amber light in my eyes in the mirror. I still hear the whispers, but they are not help me. They are from others. Other lost things, other spirits in the radio waves. And they all want me to help them. I'm not sure if I saved Mr. Abernathy or just took his place. But now, I am the night doctor. I listen for the lost, and I try to help them find their way home. Story 3. The echo of the music box. The apartment was perfect. It was a small space on the 10th floor of an old building in the city, but it had a big window that looked out over everything. As a sound engineer, I was happy to have a place where I could work and not bother my neighbors. The city was full of noise, but up here, it felt calm and quiet. That's why the sound was so strange. The first time I heard it, I thought it was just a neighbor's kid practicing an instrument. A single, clear note, played over and over again. It was a perfect, looping sound. It would start at exactly 1:17 a.m. every night and play for about 10 minutes. Then it would stop. No matter how much I listened, I couldn't figure out where it was coming from. It wasn't loud, just always there, like a tiny whisper in the night. I started to get obsessed. My job is all about sound, so I used my best equipment to find it. I placed microphones all over my apartment and used special software to see where the sound waves were coming from. The results made no sense. The sound was coming from everywhere at once, but also from nowhere. It was like a sound that was already inside the room, not a sound that was coming from outside. One night, while listening to the loop through my headphones, I felt a strange pulse in my chest. It was a low, rhythmic thumping that matched the beat of the looping note. My heart was beating in time with the sound. When the loop stopped, the strange pulsing in my chest stopped too. The next day, I found a strange note in my old apartment's history file. The previous owners had complained about a low humming sound that wouldn't go away. The building manager had dismissed it as a problem with the old pipes. But I knew it wasn't pipes. It was the note dot. I began to feel strange. My head would hurt when the sound was about to start. I would get dizzy and confused. It was like the sound was affecting my body, not just my ears. I knew I had to find the source. I had a feeling it was in my apartment. I began to look everywhere. I checked the walls, the ceiling, and the floors. I looked for a hidden space, a crack, anything. I finally found it under the old wooden floorboards. There was a small, loose panel. When I pulled it up, I found a little, worn-out music box. It was a beautiful thing, but it was broken. The metal parts were rusted, and the tiny cylinder was cracked in half. I turned the music box over. On the bottom, a tiny, handwritten note was taped. It read, "Please listen. It gets lonely." I sat there, holding the broken music box, and the sound started. 1:17 a.m., the single, looping note. But this time, I knew where it was coming from. It wasn't the music box itself that was making the sound. It was the memory of the sound. The echo of the music box's last song was trapped in this space. I did some research on the building's history. I found out that a little girl had died in a fire in my apartment a long time ago. Her favorite toy was a music box. The little note I found on the box, I realized, was written by her mother. It was a plea to anyone who found it to not forget her daughter's memory. It was a binding, a promise, a way to keep her spirit calm. I realized what I had to do. I couldn't throw the music box away. I couldn't tell anyone about the sound. If I did, the sound might get louder and spread. It might become a scream that everyone could hear. The sound wasn't a curse. It was a job. I was the new listener. I was the keeper of the memory dot. Now, every night, at 1:17 a.m., I get my headphones and my computer ready. I close my eyes and listen to the looping note. My heart starts to pulse in rhythm with it, and I feel a strange connection to a little girl I never met. I am not scared anymore. I am just a keeper. A person who listens so that others don't have to hear the echo of a forgotten song. And I know I will be listening for a long, long time. Hello everyone. I'm your storyteller, and I'm here to help you relax. I know many of you listen to this to fall asleep. Before you do, please give the video a like and subscribe to the channel. Also, let me know where you're from and what time it is for you right now. Now, get comfy and close your eyes. Story 4. The sentinel on the shore. I moved into the old lighthouse on the rocky coast to take pictures. The sea was wild and beautiful, and the light from the lantern room at the top of the lighthouse was a constant, comforting presence. As a photographer, I felt like I'd found the perfect place to work. My days were spent taking pictures of the crashing waves, the strange, twisted trees, and the old weathered stones of the lighthouse itself. But when I looked at my photos later on my computer, I noticed something strange. In the corner of a few pictures, a faint, blurred shape would appear. It was a tall, dark figure, always standing near the water's edge. It looked like a man in old, heavy clothes, but he was blurry, like the camera couldn't quite focus on him. At first, I thought it was a problem with my camera lens. Maybe it was a smudge or a small scratch. I cleaned the lens again and again. I even bought a new camera, but the blurry man was still there. He was only visible in the pictures. I couldn't see him with my own eyes when I was standing there. I started to get obsessed with it. I would take pictures of the same spot, from the same angle, waiting for the man to appear. He always did. A ghost in the machine, a figure that only the camera could capture. He wasn't a threat. He just stood there, still and silent, a blurred part of the landscape. I went to the town's small museum to look for answers. I found an old newspaper clipping about a shipwreck that happened near the lighthouse over 100 years ago. A tall sailor, the last survivor, had washed ashore. He'd been looking for help, trying to signal another ship, when he was hit by a rock and drowned. There was an old photo of the sailor. It was faded and torn, but I could still see his face. He looked just like the blurry man in my photos. I realized he wasn't a ghost, trying to scare me. He was a sentinel. He was a protector of the lighthouse, trying to warn ships of the dangerous rocks, just like he had in his last moments. He had been doing his job for 100 years, a silent warning to anyone who would listen. By taking his picture, I was seeing his warning. I was paying attention to him. The more I took pictures of him, the more he started to bleed into my real world. At first, it was just in my peripheral vision, quick flash of a blurry figure out of the corner of my eye. Then, one day, I was sitting at my desk, looking at my pictures, when I saw him. He was standing on the shore, a blurry, faded man in old clothes. He wasn't just in the picture anymore. He was there, in front of me, on the real shore. He was watching the sea, doing his job. I understood then. The sailor wasn't trapped. He was waiting. He was waiting for someone to see him, to acknowledge his presence. By taking his picture, I had given him a way to communicate. I had become the new keeper of his memory. My camera was not just for taking photos. It was for listening. It was a way for a dead man to watch over his lighthouse. Now, I keep taking my pictures. Every day I walk to the shore and take a photo of the sea. I know he is there. The blurry sentinel, standing watch. I can't leave. If I do, no one will be there to see him. No one will be there to listen. And I worry that if he feels forgotten, he won't be a sentinel anymore. He'll become something angry, something dangerous. I am the one who has to remember him so that the lighthouse can stay safe. And I know, with a cold certainty, that the blurry edges of his figure will soon be all I can see. Story 5. The Book of Forgotten Words. My job as a librarian in the city's oldest archives was my dream. The smell of old paper and leather, the quiet rooms filled with secrets from the past, it was a peaceful life. I spent my days cleaning and organizing ancient books and documents. Most of the books were just records of old events. But one day I found a book that was different. It was a small, leather-bound journal with no title. The cover was so worn, it felt soft, like old skin. Inside, the pages were filled with strange, spidery handwriting. Most of the book was just a simple record of a town's history, but one specific passage caught my eye. It was on a page near the end, and the words were dark and full of a strange anger. They told the story of a great storm that had washed away part of the town, but the words felt personal, like a curse. I read the passage, and then put the book back on the shelf. The next morning, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I went to find the book again, and when I turned to the page, the words were different. The story was still about the storm, but the angry words were gone, replaced by a more neutral, sad tone. I was sure I had read it wrong the day before, but I hadn't. The next time I checked, the passage had changed again. This time, the words were even simpler, almost like a child's story. It was as if the memory of the storm was slowly fading from the page. I started to copy the passage down in my own notebook, trying to capture each new version before it was gone forever. I tried to find other records of the storm. I searched through old newspapers and town histories, but every mention of the event was vague. They all said that a minor flood had happened. A much softer version of the story, the journal, had told. It was like the real, dark history was being erased from the world. And this single, old journal was the last thing that remembered. I realized the book wasn't changing on its own. The words were fighting against something, a great force that was trying to make the world forget. And by reading them, I was becoming the new record. I started to have strange dreams. I would see the town before the storm, the people living their lives, and then the dark. Swirling water would come, erasing everything. I could hear their screams, feel their fear. These weren't my memories, they were the book's memories, and they were becoming mine. The last time I opened the book, the passage was just a few simple words. It read, "Now you remember." And the words felt like they were spoken right into my head. I looked away for a moment, and when I looked back, the page was blank. The history was gone. The memory of the great storm, the town, and the angry words was no longer in the book. It was only in me. Now I am the last person who knows the truth. The world outside has forgotten. All the records have been changed. I can't tell anyone because they won't believe me. And I can't write it down because I feel like the force that erased the words from the books might come to erase them from my own mind. I walk through my quiet archives, surrounded by books that tell a different story, a happy, peaceful history. But I know the truth. And I know that I am the final, lonely keeper of a forgotten terror. Hello everyone, I'm your storyteller, and I'm here to help you relax. I know many of you listen to this to fall asleep. Before you do, please give the video a like and subscribe to the channel. Also, let me know where you're from and what time it is for you right now. Get comfy and close your eyes. Story 6. The Memory Garden. My new job was to take care of the botanical garden's old, forgotten greenhouse. It was a beautiful place, a big glass room filled with rare plants and strange flowers. The air inside was thick and warm, and it smelled of wet earth and things I couldn't name. In the center of the greenhouse was a special plant, unlike anything I had ever seen. It was a tall stalk with one large flower at the top. The petals were a deep, dark purple, and they looked like old, wrinkled skin. The flower was always closed. I felt a strange pull to the plant. It was silent and still, but it seemed to hum with a life all its own. I spent my first few days cleaning around it, watering the other plants and trying to figure out what was wrong with my memory. I would forget small things. I would walk into a room and forget what I was looking for. I would forget what I ate. For lunch, my own life was starting to feel fuzzy, like a dream that was fading away. Then, the strangest thing happened. I didn't just forget my own memories. I started to get new ones. I would have a quick flash in my mind of a person I didn't know, a woman with gray hair who loved the color yellow. I would feel a deep sadness for a man named Edward, a sadness that wasn't mine. I realized these new memories were coming from the plant. It was taking my memories and giving me others in return. I found an old, handwritten journal in a dusty desk drawer in the greenhouse. It belonged to the original botanist who had built the garden. He wrote about the strange plant. He called it the Memory Keeper. He said it was not from Earth. It had come from a place where memories were physical things. And it was brought here to save the memories of all who had worked in the garden before. The plant was not evil. It was just a life form that needed memories to live. The journal ended with a sad and lonely final entry. The old botanist wrote that he was feeding the plant his own memories to keep it alive. He was forgetting his own life, his family, everything he had ever been. But he knew that if he didn't, all the memories the plant held would die with it. I looked at the plant, the Memory Keeper, and I understood. It was holding the ghosts of the past, the memories of all the gardeners who had come before me. By taking my memories, it was making me part of the chain, a new link in the line of keepers. My own memories now feel thin and fragile, like dry leaves. I can still remember my name, but I'm not sure what my favorite food is anymore. I can still remember the faces of my family, but I'm not sure what we talked about yesterday. I have been given the memories of the gray-haired woman who loved yellow and the sad man named Edward. I have a choice. I can leave the greenhouse, and the plant will wither, and all the beautiful memories it holds will be lost forever. Or, I can stay and feed it my own past, slowly erasing who I am to protect the people who came before me. And as I stand here, my hand resting on the cool, wrinkled petals, I know that my memory of my own choice is already starting to fade. I am the Memory Keeper now, and I am here to make sure that no one is ever truly forgotten. Hello everyone, I'm your storyteller, and I'm here to help you relax. I know many of you listen to this to fall asleep. Before you do, please give the video a like and subscribe to the channel. Also, let me know where you're from, and what time it is for you right now. Get comfy and close your eyes. Story 7. The Ghost Signal. My job is to find patterns in data. I sit in a clean, quiet office building and stare at screens filled with numbers. I was given a huge project to analyze old climate data from a forgotten research station that existed in the 1920s. Most of the data was just what you'd expect. Temperature, wind speed, rainfall. But in the middle of all those normal numbers, I found something that wasn't supposed to be there. It was a strange, repeating pattern. A series of numbers that looked like a signal, a kind of code hidden in the noise of the old weather reports. I couldn't explain it. It was like a ghost in the machine, a signal that had traveled through 100 years of data to land on my screen. I called it the ghost signal. I became obsessed with it. I spent my nights trying to crack the code, writing new programs to analyze it. My coworkers thought I was crazy. They said it was just a technical error, a glitch in the old data. But I knew it wasn't. The numbers were too specific, too purposeful. After weeks of work, I finally broke the code. The message was simple and horrifying. It repeated over and over again, like a desperate prayer. Help me, I'm trapped. The signal was coming from the old research station, from a scientist who had worked there long ago. But that station had been abandoned in 1927. I found old records and learned about the head scientist, a man who had been working on a new kind of weather technology. His lab was destroyed, and he disappeared without a trace. The ghost signal was his distress call, a digital echo trapped in time. He wasn't a ghost in the traditional sense. He was a person stuck in the data itself, a prisoner of a forgotten experiment. I felt a connection to him, a strange, electric current that ran through my computer screen. He was trying to reach out to me, the only person who had ever seen his signal. I had to help him. I worked for days without sleep, sending a response back into the data. I told him I could hear him. He answered. He told me his signal was fading. He was being erased from time, slowly, bit by bit. If the signal disappeared completely, he would be gone forever. My job was no longer about data. It was about keeping a digital ghost alive. I had to keep my program running, keep the signal strong, to keep him from being completely forgotten. My life fell apart. I stopped going to work. My friends and family were worried. I couldn't explain it to them. How do you tell someone you are helping a man from the 1920s who is trapped in a computer file? I realized I was becoming a part of the loop. I was the anchor for his signal in the present. My own life was now tied to his, a digital prison that stretched across 100 years. Now, I spend my days and nights in front of my screen. The ghost signal, a constant presence in my life. It's not just on the computer anymore. I feel its pulse in my own heart. I see the numbers in my dreams. I know I can't let it fade, even if it means my own life will be lost in the process. The clean, logical world of code has become a haunted place, and I am the only one who knows the truth. Story 8. The sound of the river. My family had a secret. It wasn't a bad secret, just a quiet one. We were the keepers of the old, covered bridge that crossed the river. It was my job, passed down from my grandfather, to make sure the bridge was safe. I spent my days walking its wooden planks, checking for rot, and listening to the sounds of the water below. The river had a voice. My grandfather used to say that if you listened closely, you could hear the stories of the people who had crossed the bridge over the centuries. I always thought he was just being poetic, but I was about to find out he was telling the truth. One night, a terrible storm hit our town. The rain came down so hard it sounded like rocks hitting the roof, and the wind howled like a ghost. I went to the bridge to check on it. As I stood in the middle, the river below me sounded different. It wasn't just the noise of the storm. I could hear a sound that was not water. It was a faint, musical note. It sounded like a sad song played on a flute. I listened for a long time. The note was perfect, a single, sad sound that seemed to come from the deepest part of the river. When the storm finally passed and the sun came up, the note was gone. The next day, I found a very old diary hidden in the bridge's support beams. It was from the 1800s, written by a young woman named Alara. She wrote about her love for a man named Thomas, a sailor who had promised to return to her after his long journey. She would wait for him on the bridge, playing her flute. The diary ended with a sad line, "I will wait for you, forever." Thomas never came back. I realized the musical note was Ilara. She was still waiting, still playing her flute for a man who would never return. Her song was trapped in the sound of the river. I couldn't just listen. I felt a strange pull to her story. I bought a small wooden flute and taught myself to play. I went to the bridge every night, and I would play my own song. I wasn't good at it, but I played a simple, happy tune. I wanted to give her a new song to listen to, a new story. But the more I played, the more the sad note from the river began to change. It wasn't just a sad note anymore. It was a loud, angry scream. The river started to get rough, and the water would hit the bridge supports with a violent force. Elara wasn't just sad. She was angry at being forgotten. I had a new job now. I had to play the sad song, her song, to keep her calm. I had to become the echo of her lost love. If I didn't, the river would get angrier, and the bridge would be destroyed. The town would be cut off, and Alara would be truly alone, her memory lost, forever now. Every night, I go to the bridge and play the sad, perfect note on my flute. I can still hear her faint musical echo below me, and I play along with her. I am the keeper of the bridge, but I am also the keeper of her sad song. The bridge is safe, but I know the music I play is a kind of prison for us both. We are two souls on a bridge, tied together by a sad, beautiful melody that will never end. Story 9. The island that was my job as a cartographer was to restore old maps. I loved the quiet map room in the university, surrounded by centuries of forgotten lands and old seas. One day, I found a map that was different from all the others. It was a beautiful, hand-drawn map of a sea from the 1700s, full of strange sea creatures and beautiful ships. But in the middle of the map, there was a small, unnamed island that was not on any other record. The island was a tiny thing, drawn with a strange, dark ink. I felt a cold breeze on my neck as I looked at it, a feeling of being far away. When I came back to the map the next day, the island was still there, but its shape was different. Its beaches were wider, and its hills were a little taller. I thought my mind was playing tricks on me, or that I had not remembered it right. But the next time I saw it, it had changed again. It was as if the island was a living thing, a shifting memory on the page. I became obsessed with the island. I spent all my time researching the sea from that time, but I found no record of it. It was a place that existed only on this map. I realized the island was not a mistake, it was a ghost. A place that had been forgotten by the world, but not by this piece of paper. As I studied the map, I started to feel the island's presence. I could almost smell the salt in the air and feel the cold sand beneath my feet. I could hear the faint sound of waves breaking on the shore. I realized that the island was not just a place. It was a memory, a last record of a safe harbor that had appeared in a great storm to save sailors from drowning. The island had existed for a short time, just long enough to save them, and then it had sunk back into the sea. A place that was never meant to last. The map was the only thing holding that memory to the world. And by looking at it, I had become the keeper of that memory. My job was no longer just to restore the map. It was to remember the island, to keep it from being completely forgotten. The more I looked at the map, the more I felt the cold, strange reality of the island. I felt the weight of its existence on my shoulders. My life began to feel fuzzy, like the maps around me. The real world was becoming a less important place, and the island, the place that was not there, was becoming more real to me. Now, I spend my days and nights with the map. I can feel the cool sand under my feet. Even when I'm standing in the map room, I can hear the sound of the waves. I can't stop looking at it, because if I do, I'm afraid the island will be forgotten, and the memory of the sailors it saved will be lost forever. The island is gone from the world, but it lives on, in me, a cold, salt-filled secret that I am bound to keep. Hello everyone, I'm your storyteller, and I'm here to help you relax. I know many of you listen to this to fall asleep. Before you do, please give the video a like and subscribe to the channel. Also, let me know where you're from and what time it is for you right now. Now, get comfy and close your eyes. Story 10. The Clay of Sorrow. I'm a sculptor, and my hands are happiest when they are working with clay. So when I found an old, dusty art studio for rent, I took it right away. The studio was in a quiet part of town, and it was full of half-finished sculptures and tools left behind by the previous owner, a man who had disappeared years ago. The air smelled of old wood and dry earth, and it felt like a good place to create. I found a large block of dark, reddish-brown clay in the corner. It felt different from any clay I'd ever touched. It was cold and heavy, and when I put my hands on it, I felt a sudden wave of sadness, so strong it almost made me cry. It wasn't my sadness. It was a memory of a deep and terrible sorrow that seemed to be trapped in the clay itself. I became obsessed with the feeling. I had to know what it was. I started to work with the clay, shaping it into a human face. As I worked, the feeling of sadness grew stronger, and I began to feel a strange, cold loneliness that was not my own. When the face was finished, it looked like a person who was crying, and from the eyes, a dark, oily liquid seemed to weep. I found a journal left behind by the old sculptor. He had written about the clay, how it came from a place where a great tragedy had happened long ago. He said, the clay was not just earth. It was the memory of emotion, a solid form of all the sadness and fear of the people who had suffered there. The sculptor had tried to use his art to release the trapped emotions, to give them a form and a purpose. But his last entry was just a sketch of the weeping face, and the words, I am becoming the clay. I realized the horror. The old sculptor hadn't disappeared. He had been consumed by the very emotions he was trying to release. He had become a part of the art, a prisoner of the clay. And now I was doing the same thing. Every piece I made with the clay took a part of me, a part of my own joy and happiness, and replaced it with the cold sadness of the past. My studio is now full of my work, a collection of beautiful but sorrowful sculptures. They all feel cold, to the touch, and I can't remember what it feels like to be happy. My hands, my heart, my mind are now filled with the emotions of the clay, but I can't stop. I have to keep creating, to keep giving a home to these terrible feelings, because if I don't, they might fester forever. Now, I look at my hands, which are stained with the reddish clay, and I know I have a final piece to make, a self-portrait. I need to make one last sculpture, so that a part of my own life, my own memory, can be saved. I am no longer a person who works with clay. I am a part of the clay itself, a keeper of all the sorrow and fear that lives in this beautiful, terrible earth.